I stood in the center of St. Augustine's Cathedral in San Francisco, surrounded by cold marble and colder glances from people dressed in designer black. My husband, Franklin Ellison, one of the most powerful tech billionaires in California, lay in a satin-lined mahogany casket just feet from where I stood. Or so I thought. The choir had just finished singing Ave Maria when my phone buzzed inside. My clutch. I almost didn't check it. I was grieving. But something in my chest whispered, "Look." It was a message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "I'm not in there." My hand trembled. The color drained from my face. I stared at the screen again. I texted back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "I'm Franklin. I'm alive. Don't trust anyone, especially Avery." Avery? My daughter? My world shattered in a single blink. I looked up from my phone to see Avery approaching. At 27, she was the perfect fusion of Franklin's ambition and my practicality. Today, her face was a composed mask of grief, not a single tear smudging her immaculate makeup. "Mom," she whispered, taking my arm, "it's time for your eulogy." I nodded, slipping my phone back into my clutch. Was this some cruel joke? Or was my husband truly alive, warning me about our only child? Walking to the pulpit felt like moving through water. The faces of Silicon Valley's elite blurred together. Board members, venture capitalists, politicians who had courted Franklin's influence. I gripped the edges of the marble stand and looked down at the speech I'd prepared. Words about Franklin's brilliant mind, his innovative spirit, how he'd built Ellison Technologies from a garage startup to a global empire, how he'd been a loving husband for 45 years. But my eyes kept drifting to the casket, to Avery, sitting in the front row beside her fiancé Bradley Moore, a man Franklin had never fully trusted, to the closed lid that supposedly concealed my husband's body after the horrific car accident. Franklin believed in truth above all else, I heard myself saying, deviating from my prepared remarks. He believed that lies, no matter how comforting, would eventually poison everything they touched. I saw Avery shift uncomfortably. Bradley placed a hand on her knee. My husband was many things. Brilliant, demanding, visionary, but he was never a liar. The cathedral fell silent. This wasn't the soft, reminiscent eulogy they'd expected. And if Franklin were here today, he would want the truth to be told. Avery's eyes widened slightly. Bradley's hand tightened on her knee. The truth about his legacy, about his intentions for the company he built. I paused, my heart hammering. About who should carry his vision forward. I finished the eulogy with practiced words, but my mind was racing a million miles ahead. As I returned to my seat, my phone buzzed again. "Meet me at our bench. Golden Gate Park. 11 p.m. tonight. Our bench. Where Franklin had proposed to me 46 years ago, when we were both just dreamers with empty pockets." After the service, the funeral procession wound its way to the cemetery. I watched as they lowered the casket into the ground. I threw a white rose onto the gleaming mahogany surface, wondering what, or who, was actually inside. At the reception afterward, I observed. Bradley kept pulling Avery into corners, whispering urgently. Board members clustered in tight groups, their expressions calculating rather than mournful. Franklin's younger brother, Simon, watched me with concerned eyes, the only person who seemed genuinely sorry for my loss. "Maggie," Simon said, approaching with a glass of water, "how are you holding up?" "I'm processing," I replied carefully. "I know it was sudden," he said. "The accident. Was there an autopsy?" I asked abruptly. Simon blinked. Avery handled those details, said you were too distraught. Did you see him? After?" Simon's face clouded. "No, Avery said the damage was too extensive. That's why the closed casket." I nodded, filing this information away. "Has anyone mentioned the company succession?" Simon asked, lowering his voice. "I know it's soon, but there are rumors that Bradley's pushing for an emergency board meeting tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I stared at him. "Franklin isn't even in the ground for 24 hours. "I know." Simon looked troubled. "It doesn't seem right." Across the room, I caught Avery watching us. Her gaze was sharp, assessing. "Thank you, Simon," I said. "Would you mind bringing me my coat? I think I need some air." Once alone on the terrace of the reception hall, I checked my phone again. 11 p.m., 6 hours away. 6 hours to decide if I was losing my mind or if my husband was truly alive and in danger from our own daughter. I looked out over San Francisco Bay, the water reflecting the gray sky. Franklin and I had built everything from nothing. We'd started in a rented apartment, eating ramen noodles while he coded, and I sewed custom dresses to make ends meet. Now I stood in designer heels at his funeral, with a billion-dollar empire hanging in the balance, and possibly his life as well. "Mom?" Avery's voice startled me. "Are you okay?" I turned to face my daughter, studying her features. Franklin's determined jaw, my green eyes. Was there something else there now? Something calculating? Or was my grief making me paranoid? "Just remembering," I said softly. "Your father proposed to me in Golden Gate Park, did you know that?" Something flickered across Avery's face. "You've told me, yes. We had nothing then. Absolutely nothing. Except each other." Avery nodded, her expression softening slightly. "You built everything together." "Yes, we did." I held her gaze. Everything. For a moment I saw a glimpse of my little girl, the one who used to fall asleep listening to Franklin's stories about changing the world through technology. Then Bradley appeared in the doorway, and her expression shifted back to controlled composure. "The lawyers want to speak with you, babe," Bradley said. "About tomorrow's meeting." I raised an eyebrow. "What meeting is that, Bradley?" He hesitated, looking to Avery. "Just some formalities, Mom," Avery said smoothly. "Nothing for you to worry about right now." I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm still the majority shareholder, Avery. Or has that changed too?" Avery's perfect composure cracked, just for a second. "Of course not. I just thought, with everything happening, you'd want to be left in peace. Your father taught me many things," I said quietly. "One of them was never to sign anything without reading it first. I'll be at that meeting." I walked past them, back into the reception. My mind was made up. I would go to Golden Gate Park tonight, and if Franklin was truly alive, we would uncover whatever conspiracy had led to his death, even if it meant confronting the possibility that our own daughter was behind it. The hours after the reception crawled by with excruciating slowness. I returned to the empty mansion Franklin and I had shared for the past 20 years, a modern glass and steel structure perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Once, its open spaces had felt like freedom. Now they felt exposed, as if someone might be watching my every move. I changed out of my funeral clothes into jeans and a dark sweater, then sat in Franklin's study, surrounded by the artifacts of his life. Awards, photographs. The first computer he'd ever built, preserved in a glass case. On his desk sat the last project he'd been working on, a neural interface that could help people with paralysis communicate more effectively. "Why would you fake your death?" I whispered to the empty room. "What were you afraid of?" At 10:30 p.m., I slipped out through the service entrance of the mansion and took the gardener's truck rather than my own car. If someone was watching, I didn't want to be followed. Golden Gate Park was nearly empty this late. I parked several blocks away from our bench and walked the rest of the distance, staying in the shadows, constantly checking to see if anyone was following me. Our bench sat beneath an old oak tree, overlooking a small pond. In daylight, it was idyllic. At night, with fog rolling in from the bay, it felt isolated and eerie. I sat down, pulling my jacket tighter around me, and waited. 10:58 p.m., 10:59 p.m., 11:00 p.m. Nothing. My heart sank. Maybe it had been a cruel prank after all. Maybe grief was making me believe impossible things. Then a figure emerged from the fog. Not Franklin's tall, commanding presence, but someone smaller, hunched over slightly. As they approached, I realized it was an elderly man with a cane, someone I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Ellison?" he asked in a raspy voice. I nodded, cautiously. "My name is Sean Ridge. I'm a private investigator." He sat down beside me, moving stiffly. "Your husband hired me 3 months ago." "Where is Franklin?" I demanded. "Is he really alive?" Sean glanced around the park before answering. "Yes, but he's in hiding. It's not safe for him to be seen." "What happened?" "The accident was staged," Sean confirmed. "Franklin discovered something about Ellison Technologies, something that made him fear for his life." "What did he discover?" Sean reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This will explain everything. But not here. It's not safe. I need more than that," I insisted. "Those messages, were they really from Franklin?" "Yes and no," Sean admitted. "I sent them, but at his instruction. We needed to make contact with you, but carefully." "Why? What's going on? And why would he warn me about Avery?" Sean's weathered face looked pained. Mrs. Ellison, have you looked at your company's financial records lately? Or the recent patents filed under Ellison Technologies? No. Franklin handled the business side. Someone's been siphoning money from the company for months, and there's been a systematic effort to transfer intellectual property rights to a shell corporation, a corporation controlled by Bradley Moore. My stomach dropped. Bradley? But he's engaged to your daughter, yes, who was recently made acting CEO. I thought back to that appointment, how surprised I'd been when Franklin had suddenly elevated Avery 6 months ago. He'd explained it as succession planning, preparing her to eventually take over. But there had been something off about his demeanor when he told me. Franklin wouldn't believe it at first, Sean continued, but the evidence kept mounting. When he finally confronted Avery privately, something changed. He became convinced his life was in danger. That's absurd, I protested. Avery would never. 2 days after that confrontation, his car's brake lines were tampered with. He survived only because he decided to take a different car that day. I felt the blood drain from my face. Where is he now? Somewhere safe, but he needs your help. Inside this envelope are instructions and evidence. Memorize what you need to, then destroy it. I want to see him, I insisted. Soon, Sean promised. But first, we need to secure the evidence, and you need to attend that. Board meeting tomorrow. How did you know about the meeting? Sean gave me a grim smile. Because that's when they plan to complete the takeover, with you signing over your shares. I would never, not willingly, no. But there are documents prepared with your signature already on them, forged, of course. My head was spinning. This is insane. You're telling me my daughter and her fiancé faked my husband's death to take over his company? That's exactly what I'm telling you. And unless we stop them tomorrow, they'll succeed. A twig snapped somewhere behind us. Sean stiffened. We need to go, he whispered. Separately. Read the envelope when you're somewhere secure, then call the number inside. He stood up quickly, surprisingly spry for someone who had appeared so frail moments before. I realized the elderly man act had been just that. An act. Mrs. Ellison, he said quietly, trust no one. Not your household staff, not your friends, and especially not your daughter. Then he melted back into the fog, leaving me alone with an envelope that apparently contained proof that my family was being torn apart by greed and betrayal. I sat there for a long moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Then I heard another sound. Definitely footsteps this time. Without looking back, I rose and hurried in the opposite direction from where Sean had gone. As I reached the park exit, I glanced back. A figure stood by our bench, phone in hand, the screen illuminating a face I recognized all too well. Bradley Moore. Had he followed me? Heard my conversation with Sean? I ducked behind a tree, heart pounding, and watched as he made a call. She knows, I heard him say distantly. The old man told her everything. There was a pause. No, I didn't get the envelope, but it doesn't matter now. We need to move up the timeline. Another pause. I don't care what you have to do, Avery. Handle your mother or I'll handle her my way. He ended the call and began scanning. The park, probably looking for me. I pressed myself against the tree, barely breathing, until he finally turned and walked away. Once I was sure he was gone, I ran to the gardener's truck and drove back to the mansion, my mind racing. I needed to get somewhere safe to read Franklin's instructions. But where? If my own home wasn't safe, where could I go? As I drove, one thought kept repeating in my mind. My husband was alive. My daughter was a traitor. And tomorrow, I would have to face them both. I didn't return to the mansion that night. Instead, I drove to the small apartment complex in Daly City that Franklin and I had invested in decades ago. Our first real estate purchase when Ellison Technologies began to succeed. We kept one unit vacant for sentimental reasons, though Franklin often joked it was our apocalypse backup plan. The key was still hidden in the same spot, behind a loose brick in the building's rear courtyard. The apartment was sparse but clean. A standing arrangement with the property manager ensured it remained habitable. As I locked the door behind me, I finally allowed myself to breathe. With trembling hands, I opened Sean Ridge's envelope under the kitchen's harsh fluorescent light. Inside were several items: a USB drive, a handwritten letter from Franklin, and a stack of printed documents. I read Franklin's letter first, recognizing his precise handwriting immediately. Maggie, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. I've discovered something terrible about Ellison Technologies, a conspiracy that reaches into the heart of our family. Someone has been systematically stealing our patents and diverting company funds. The trail leads directly to Bradley Moore, but I've found evidence that Avery is involved as well. I confronted her 2 months ago, hoping there was an explanation. She denied everything, but the next day my brakes failed on the way to work. It wasn't an accident, Maggie. I've given Sean everything I've found. Trust him. He'll help you expose the truth. The USB contains financial records, emails, and recorded conversations. The most damning is a recording of Bradley discussing plans to remove me with someone whose voice is distorted. But Maggie, I'd stake my life that it's Avery. I'm sorry to leave you with this burden, but I need to disappear until we can gather enough evidence to stop them legally. They think I'm dead now, which gives us an advantage. Remember our first apartment? The key to everything is still there, where we always kept it. I love you. Stay safe. Franklin. My hands shook as I set down the letter. I moved to the bedroom and pressed on the loose floorboard beneath the window, our old hiding place. Inside was a small fireproof box with a combination lock. I entered our anniversary date, and it clicked open. Inside was a small leather notebook, Franklin's private journal, and a second USB drive labeled Insurance. I returned to the kitchen table and began going through the printed documents. They painted a disturbing picture. Shell companies created under variations of Bradley's name, receiving massive consulting fees from Ellison Technologies. Patent applications with timestamps, showing they'd been filed hours after being copied from our secure servers. Most damning of all, a life insurance policy on Franklin for $25 million with Avery as the sole beneficiary, dated just 3 months ago, with what appeared to be my signature as a witness, though I had never seen the document before. My phone buzzed. A text from Avery. Mom, where are you? Came by the house to check on you. Worried. I didn't respond. Instead, I plugged the first USB drive into my laptop. The files were meticulously organized. Typical Franklin. Financial records, surveillance photos of Bradley meeting with representatives from our biggest competitor, and, most chillingly, audio files. I clicked on one labeled B-Play Office March 15. Bradley's voice came through clearly. The old man won't step down. Willingly. He's too attached to his legacy. Then Avery's voice, unmistakable. He'll have to be persuaded. The board is already on our side. Persuasion might not be enough, Bradley replied. We've talked about more permanent solutions. A pause. Then Avery. I can't have this conversation. You don't have to say anything. Just don't stand in the way when it happens. Another pause. Just make sure my mother is protected. She doesn't deserve to be hurt. Of course, Bradley said smoothly. She'll be taken care of. Grief counseling, a nice place in Napa Valley, far from corporate concerns. And the money? You're sure it can't be traced? Positive. Once the accident happens and the insurance pays out, we'll have the capital we need to complete the merger. Your father's company will evolve, just not in the direction he planned. I felt physically ill. I closed the audio file and opened another, then another. Each revealed more pieces of the plot. Bradley had been working with Neurotech, our biggest competitor, to orchestrate a hostile takeover disguised as a merger. Avery had been promised the CEO position in the new company and a substantial payout. The only obstacle had been Franklin, and his unexpected death had cleared the path. Except Franklin wasn't dead. He had outmaneuvered them, at least temporarily. I checked the time. 3:42 a.m. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 more a.m. I needed to be there, but I also needed a plan. I pulled out my phone and called the number Sean had left in the envelope. Mrs. Ellison, he answered on the first ring. Did you review the materials? Yes, I said, my voice hollow. I need to see Franklin. Not yet. It's too dangerous. I don't care. I need to see my husband. Sean was silent for a moment. There's a possibility, but not until after the board meeting. We need you there. To do what? Watch my daughter commit corporate fraud? To record it, Sean said firmly. To get irrefutable evidence. The documents are compelling, but we need Avery or Bradley to incriminate themselves explicitly. And how am I supposed to do that? Play along, Sean advised. Act devastated by Franklin's death, willing to sign whatever they put in front of you. But before you go, place this in your handbag. He described a small recording device disguised as a compact mirror. It's already in your car, under the passenger seat. You put something in my car? I asked, alarmed. Franklin did before he disappeared. It's completely secure. I took a deep breath. Okay, what else? Wear this. He sent a photo to my phone, a sapphire brooch Franklin had given me on our 40th anniversary. It contains a backup recording device in case they search your bag. You think they'd go that far? Mrs. Ellison, they faked your husband's death. They'll do whatever it takes to secure those company assets. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I'll be ready. One more thing, Sean added. If things go wrong, if you feel threatened, say Franklin always loved this view. That's the signal, and help will arrive immediately. What kind of help? The federal kind. We've been building this case for weeks. After ending the call, I plugged in the second USB drive, the insurance one from our hiding place. It contained a video file dated just 1 week ago. Franklin's face filled the screen, looking tired but determined. Maggie, if you're watching this, then everything has gone according to plan, or horribly wrong. He smiled sadly. I've had to make an impossible choice, to let the world, including you, believe I'm dead. I'm sorry for the pain this has caused you, but it was the only way to protect both of us. He explained that he'd discovered the conspiracy 3 months earlier when reviewing patent applications and noticing discrepancies. As he dug deeper, he uncovered Bradley and Avery's scheme. The hardest part was accepting Avery's involvement, he said, his voice breaking. Our daughter Maggie. I don't know when or how we lost her to greed, but the evidence is undeniable. He detailed his plan, to fake his death with Sean's help after discovering the assassination attempt, to gather evidence while everyone believed he was gone. Tomorrow, you'll go to that board meeting. You'll pretend to be the grieving widow, too distraught to question what they put in front of you. But you won't sign anything. Create a distraction. Demand time to review the documents. Anything to delay. By then, Sean should have everything we need. His eyes softened. I'm safe, Maggie, and soon we'll be together again. Trust Sean. Trust yourself. And remember, even in our darkest days, we always found the light together. The video ended. I sat in silence, tears streaming down my face. Then I stood up, wiped my eyes, and began preparing for battle. My husband was alive, my daughter was a stranger, and in a few hours, I would face the fight of my life. I arrived at Ellison Technologies headquarters at 8:30 a.m., dressed in a conservative black suit that subtly signaled my mourning. The sapphire brooch gleamed at my lapel, and the recording device disguised as a compact mirror sat in my handbag. I had applied minimal makeup and deliberately left my eyes slightly reddened. The grieving widow, exactly as they would expect. The company's glass and steel tower dominated this section of the San Francisco skyline, a testament to Franklin's vision. As I entered the lobby, employees stopped and offered condolences. I nodded graciously, playing my role while studying their faces. Who else might be involved in the conspiracy? Mrs. Ellison, our longtime receptionist, Teresa, greeted me with genuine sorrow. I'm so sorry for your loss. We all loved Mr. Ellison. Thank you, Teresa, I replied softly. Is the board assembled yet? Almost everyone is here. They're in the main conference room on 50. As I rode the elevator up, I mentally reviewed what I knew about our board members. There were 12 in total. Franklin and I held seats, as did Avery since her appointment as acting CEO. The other 9 were a mix of early investors, industry experts, and corporate partners. Which ones had Bradley and Avery managed to turn against Franklin? The elevator doors opened directly into the executive floor. Avery was waiting, her expression a perfect mask of concerned, daughterly love. Mom, she said, embracing me. I was worried when you didn't come home last night. I needed space, I replied, returning her embrace stiffly. To think. She drew back, studying my face. Are you sure you're up for this today? I can handle everything if you'd prefer to rest. I'm sure you could, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. But I'll be fine. Something flickered in her eyes. Annoyance? Concern? Then she smiled tightly. Of course. Dad would want you here. Would he, Avery? I thought. Or would he be horrified to see what you've become? She led me to the conference room, where board members were settling into their seats around the massive table. Bradley stood at the head, where Franklin used to sit. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Margaret, Bradley greeted me, coming forward to kiss my cheek. Thank you for coming. I know how difficult this must be. I allowed the kiss but didn't return his warm smile. Franklin built this company. I wouldn't miss discussing its future. Bradley's smile faltered slightly. Of course. Please have a seat. I took my usual place, noting that Franklin's chair at the table's head remained conspicuously empty, a sign of respect or a strategic move to remind everyone of the power vacuum. Before we begin, I said clearly, I'd like to thank everyone for their condolences and support during this unexpected tragedy. Murmurs of sympathy circulated the room. I studied each face, looking for signs of complicity or discomfort. Let's call this emergency meeting to order, Bradley announced. As you all know, Franklin's tragic. Passing leaves significant questions about leadership and direction for Ellison Technologies. Questions that need immediate answers, added James Wilson, one of our earliest investors and, I suspected, one of the board members Bradley had turned. Exactly, Bradley agreed. The market doesn't tolerate uncertainty, especially for a company of our stature. I noticed how he said our, as if he already considered the company his. Item 1. Avery continued smoothly, distributing folders. The succession plan for executive leadership. As acting CEO, I propose we remove the acting qualifier immediately to provide stability. I second the motion, said Wilson. Before we vote, I interjected, I'd like to review the company bylaws regarding succession. Avery's smile tightened. Mom, we've been through this. Dad appointed me acting CEO 6 months ago with the understanding that he would still be here to oversee the transition. I finished for her. Circumstances have changed dramatically. Mrs. Ellison, Bradley said gently, I understand this is difficult, but Avery is simply trying to honor Franklin's wishes. Is she? I asked mildly. Then, she won't mind if I take the time to review the succession protocols personally. After all, as majority shareholder, my approval is required for any leadership change. A flicker of alarm passed between Bradley and Avery. Actually, Bradley said, pulling out another document, that's item 2 on our agenda. In light of recent events, we believe it would be best for you to transition to an emeritus role, honorary, but without the burden of operational involvement. And my shares? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Would be placed in a trust, Avery explained, managed by the board for the benefit of the company. You'd still receive all financial benefits, of course. Of course, I echoed. And who would control this trust? A committee, Bradley said smoothly. Avery, myself, and Mr. Wilson. I nodded, as if considering. I see. And this is what you believe Franklin would have wanted? Dad always said the company needed to look forward, not backward, Avery said, a practiced sincerity in her voice. He was preparing me for leadership, Mom. You know that. I know he trusted you, I replied, my voice catching slightly. With everything. The faintest flush colored Avery's cheeks. Good. She could still feel shame. We have the paperwork prepared, Bradley continued, sliding a document toward me. A simple signature, and you can focus on healing while we handle the business concerns. I glanced at the document, recognizing it as the transfer of share ownership they'd planned all along, the culmination of their conspiracy. Before I sign anything, I said, I'd like to discuss the acquisition offer from Neurotech. That is where this is heading, isn't it? Bradley couldn't hide his surprise. How did you? Franklin and I talked about everything, Bradley. I lied smoothly. He mentioned Neurotech had been making overtures. He was quite opposed to the idea. Dad didn't understand the strategic advantages, Avery said quickly. Neurotech has distribution channels we need for global expansion. And what did they get in return? I asked. Our patents, Wilson answered. A fair exchange. The neural interface patents? I pressed. Franklin's life's work? Business requires compromise, Mom, Avery said, a touch of condescension in her voice. Sometimes we have to let go of the past to secure the future. I nodded slowly, reaching for my handbag. Franklin always said something similar. I removed the compact mirror recording device, pretending to check my appearance. He said the past informs the future, but shouldn't constrain it. I noticed Bradley eyeing the compact suspiciously. Would you excuse me for a moment? I asked, standing up. I need to use the restroom. Of course, Avery said, though she looked annoyed at the interruption. In the privacy of the executive bathroom, I checked that the recording was working, then sent a quick text to Sean, proceeding as planned. Neurotech connection confirmed. His response came immediately. Good. Keep them talking. Backup is standing by. I returned to the conference room with renewed resolve. It was time to push harder. I've been thinking, I announced as I took my seat, about Franklin's last project, the neural interface for paralysis patients. He was so passionate about its potential to help people. It's still in development, Avery said dismissively, years from market readiness. And yet, I continued, Neurotech seems quite interested in acquiring it. I wonder why. Bradley and Avery exchanged glances. The potential applications are significant, Bradley offered. Yes, I agreed. Franklin mentioned something about military applications. Neural control of drones, wasn't it? Something he explicitly forbade in the patent restrictions? The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Mom, Avery said carefully, business evolves. Dad's idealism was admirable, but not profitable enough, I finished. Is that why you needed him out of the way? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The silence that followed my accusation was deafening. Board members exchanged uncomfortable glances while Bradley's face hardened into a mask of controlled anger. Margaret, he said carefully, grief can make us say irrational things. Perhaps we should postpone. I'm not grief-stricken, Bradley, I replied evenly. I'm clear-headed for the first time in months, and I'm asking a simple question. Did you and Avery orchestrate my husband's removal to facilitate this merger with Neurotech? Avery stood up, her composure cracking. Mom, this is inappropriate and frankly, disturbing. Dad died in an accident. A tragic, horrible accident. Did he? I asked, looking directly at her. Because I have evidence suggesting otherwise. Bradley's hand moved, almost imperceptibly toward his jacket pocket, reaching for his phone, I suspected. I needed to keep pushing. The board should know, I continued, that I've been investigating suspicious financial transactions from Ellison Technologies to several shell companies. Companies that trace back to you, Bradley. Wilson cleared his throat nervously. Mrs. Ellison, these are serious accusations. With serious evidence to back them up, I countered, including recorded conversations. Avery's face paled. What recordings? I smiled sadly. Franklin wasn't as oblivious as you thought. He knew what was happening, Avery. He was gathering evidence for weeks before his convenient accident. Bradley abandoned subtlety and pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I suspected he was warning whoever else was involved, perhaps ordering the destruction of evidence. This is absurd, he declared. Franklin died in a car crash. The police report confirmed brake failure due to worn components. A police report based on evidence that you provided, I said, since the car was conveniently destroyed in the ensuing fire. Another board member, Dr. Chen, leaned forward. Mrs. Ellison, are you suggesting foul play? I'm not suggesting anything, I replied. I'm stating it plainly. My husband discovered that his daughter and her fiancé were embezzling from his company and plotting to sell his life's work to competitors. When he confronted them, they arranged an accident. That's enough, Avery shouted, slamming her hands on the table. You're having some kind of breakdown, Mom. This is exactly why we need to transition you to an emeritus role. I reached into my bag and pulled out copies of the documents from Sean's envelope, sliding them across the table. Financial records showing millions diverted to shell companies. Patent applications filed with Neurotech hours after our secure servers were accessed. And most damning of all, a $25 million life insurance policy on Franklin that I supposedly witnessed, except I never saw this document before yesterday. The board members began examining the papers, murmuring among themselves. Bradley's face had turned to stone, while Avery looked frantically between him and the documents. These are fabrications, Bradley insisted. Someone is clearly trying to sabotage the company during this vulnerable transition. Then you won't mind if we bring in forensic accountants to verify, I said. And perhaps the FBI's white-collar crime division? At the mention of the FBI, Wilson abruptly stood. I think we should adjourn this meeting until these allegations can be properly addressed. Sit down, James, Bradley commanded. This is clearly a desperate attempt by Margaret to maintain control. The documents are forgeries. Are the recordings forgeries too? I asked. The ones where you discuss more permanent solutions to the Franklin problem? Avery's composure shattered completely. You don't understand, she blurted out. He was going to ruin everything. Bradley shot her a warning look, but it was too late. What exactly don't I understand, Avery? I pressed, keeping my voice steady despite my breaking heart. Dad was living in the past, she exclaimed. He refused to see where technology was heading. He kept rejecting partnership opportunities, turning down acquisition offers that would have made us billions. Because he had principles, I said quietly. Because he built this company to help people, not just to make money. Principles don't keep you relevant in this industry, Bradley interjected. Franklin was becoming a liability. His obsession with ethics was limiting the company's potential. So you decided to eliminate the liability, I concluded. We never meant for anyone to get hurt, Avery said, her voice smaller now. The plan was just to ease him out gradually. The board was already on our side. Bradley placed a hand on her arm, trying to silence her, but she shook it off. But then he found those transfers, started asking questions. He threatened to fire me, Bradley, everyone involved. She looked at me pleadingly. We just needed him to step back. The accident it wasn't supposed to happen like that. But it did happen, I said. Or at least, you wanted everyone to think it did. Bradley's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? I stood up slowly, looking around. The room at the shocked board members. Franklin always loved this view, I said clearly, giving Sean's signal. He said you could see the future from up here. Almost immediately, the conference room doors burst open. Several FBI agents entered, led by a woman in a dark suit who identified herself as Special Agent Diana Ramirez. Bradley Moore, Avery Ellison, she announced. You're both under CO. Arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, attempted murder, and a host of other charges will sort out down at the field office. As agents moved to handcuff them, Bradley lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. You stupid old woman! You have no idea what you've done! 2 agents restrained him while Avery just stood there, tears streaming down her face. Mom, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to be like this. As they were led away, Agent Ramirez approached me. Mrs. Ellison, we've secured the building and are seizing computers and files as we speak. Is there anything else you can tell us? Yes, I said. I have additional evidence in my possession, and I believe there may be more at my home. She nodded. We'll need statements from you and all board members. And, Mrs. Ellison? Yes? There's someone who'd like to see you. He's waiting downstairs. My heart leapt. Take me to him. As the agents continued their work, Agent Ramirez escorted me to the elevator. We rode down in silence, my mind racing with what I would say to Franklin after believing he was dead, after discovering our daughter's betrayal. The elevator opened not into the lobby, but the my parking garage. Standing beside a black SUV with tinted windows was Sean Ridge, and next to him, looking thinner and more tired than I'd ever seen him, but unmistakably alive, was Franklin. I rushed forward, and he gathered me into his arms. For a long moment, we just held each other. No words necessary. Maggie, he finally whispered. I'm so sorry. You're alive, I said, touching his face, reassuring myself this was real. That's all that matters right now. Not all, he said grimly. Our daughter. I know, I interrupted. I heard it all, Franklin. She confessed. His face crumpled with pain. Where did we go wrong? How did we raise her to become someone who could do this? I had no answer. We stood there, holding each other amid the chaos of an FBI operation, trying to make sense of a betrayal so profound it had nearly cost Franklin his life. Agent Ramirez approached after giving us a moment. Mr. Ellison, we'll need your formal statement as well, and we should move you both to a secure location until we've rounded up everyone involved. There are others? I asked. Several Neurotech executives, for starters, Sean explained. This conspiracy goes beyond just Bradley and Avery. As we were escorted to another vehicle, I looked back at the towering glass headquarters of Ellison Technologies, the empire we had built together, now the site of our greatest heartbreak. What happens now? I asked Franklin. He squeezed my hand. We rebuild, not the company. Us. We figure out how to live with what's happened. As the SUV pulled away, I knew our lives would never be the same. Our daughter was facing criminal charges. Our company was in chaos. But Franklin was alive, and somehow, we would find a way forward together. The weeks following the arrests were a blur of FBI interviews, emergency board meetings, and press conferences. Franklin's return from the dead dominated headlines. Tech billionaire faked death to expose family conspiracy. Daughter's betrayal. Inside the Ellison Tech scandal. We stayed in a FBI-arranged safe house while the investigation unfolded, protected from the media frenzy and any potential threats from conspirators still at large. Each morning, Agent Ramirez would update us on new developments, The case was expanding beyond anything we had initially imagined. Neurotech's CEO and CFO have been indicted, she informed us over coffee one morning. We've frozen accounts in 3 countries and recovered nearly $30 million in diverted funds. And Avery? Franklin asked quietly. It was the question that haunted us both. Ramirez's expression softened slightly. She's cooperating, providing names, details, documents. Her attorney is pushing for a plea deal. I watched Franklin absorb this information, his face a mask of controlled pain. In the 2 weeks since our reunion, we'd barely spoken about Avery. The wound was too raw, the betrayal too profound. What about Bradley? I asked. Not cooperating, Ramirez replied. But it doesn't matter. We have enough to put him away for decades. After she left, Franklin and I sat in silence on the small balcony of our temporary residence, looking out at the city. That had been our home for decades. I want to see her, Franklin finally said. I reached for his hand. Are you sure? No, he admitted. But I need to understand Maggie. I need to hear from her own lips why she did this. I nodded, understanding his need even while dreading the encounter. I'll ask Ramirez to arrange it. 3 days later, we were escorted to the federal detention center, where Avery was being held pending trial. The visiting room was stark and institutional, a painful contrast to the privileged life our daughter had always known. When Avery entered, escorted by a guard, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She looked small in the standard-issue jumpsuit. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Avery's composure crumbled, and she began to cry. Dad, she whispered, you're really alive. Franklin didn't move to embrace her. Yes, Avery, despite your best efforts. She flinched as if he'd struck her. I never wanted you dead, she insisted. That was Bradley. He said we just needed to scare you, to force you into retirement. By tampering with my car? Franklin's voice was ice. That goes beyond scaring someone, Avery. She looked down at her hands. Things escalated. Bradley said we were too far in to back out, that if you exposed the embezzlement, we'd go to prison anyway. So instead, you decided I should die, Franklin concluded. No! Avery looked up desperately. When the brake line plan failed, faking your death was my idea to protect you. I convinced Bradley it was better if you disappeared, thought everyone believed you were gone. Except you actually tried to kill me first, Franklin said. And when that failed, you pretended I was dead to take control of my company. Avery had no response to this. Her tears fell silently. I finally spoke. Why, Avery? We gave you everything. Love, education, opportunity. You were set to inherit it all eventually. Eventually. Wasn't soon enough, she said bitterly. Dad was never going to retire, never going to let me truly lead. Because you weren't ready, Franklin replied evenly. Your values weren't aligned with the company's mission. Your values, you mean, she shot back, a flash of the old Avery emerging. Your outdated, limiting vision. Do you know what Neurotech offered? Billions, Dad. Global reach. Military. Contracts that would have revolutionized warfare. Weaponizing technology designed to help paralyzed people communicate, Franklin said. Yes, I'm aware. That's precisely why I refused their offers for years. The world is changing, Avery insisted. Either we weaponize it, or someone else will. At least this way we profit. Franklin shook his head slowly. When did money become more important than morality to you, Avery? Where did we go wrong in raising you? The question hung in the air between us. Avery's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by something more complex. Regret, perhaps, or simple exhaustion. You didn't go wrong, she said finally. I did. Somewhere along the way, I started believing that success was measured only in dollars and power. She looked up at us, her eyes red-rimmed. Bradley said I was thinking too small. That loyalty to family was holding me back from greatness. And now? I asked. She gestured to our surroundings. Now I've lost everything. My freedom, my reputation, my future. Her voice broke. My parents. Franklin leaned forward. You lost us the moment you chose money over integrity, Avery. The moment you decided my life was worth less than a corporate merger. I know, she whispered, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. The guard announced our time was up. As we stood to leave, Avery called out, What will happen to the company? Franklin paused. Ellison Technologies will continue its original mission, developing technology that helps people, not harms them. Whether you'll ever be part of that again isn't up to me anymore. We left her there, a broken version of the daughter we had raised and loved. Outside in the harsh California sunshine, I finally let my own tears fall. She's still our daughter, I said quietly. Franklin put his arm around me. Yes, and she's also a criminal who nearly destroyed everything we built, everything we believe in. Can we ever forgive her? He sighed heavily. I don't know, Maggie. I honestly don't know. Back at the safe house, we found Agent Ramirez waiting with news. The board had called an emergency session and voted to reinstate Franklin as CEO, with a mandate to clean house and rebuild the company's reputation. They're desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, Ramirez explained. Several board members have resigned already, including Wilson. Good, Franklin said grimly. They were either complicit or oblivious. Neither deserves a seat at the table. What will you do? I asked him. He looked at me thoughtfully. Not me. Us. What will we do? I raised an eyebrow. We? I'm appointing you as co-CEO, Maggie, he said firmly. This was always our company, our vision. We built it together. We'll rebuild it together. Agent Ramirez smiled. I'll leave you two to discuss business strategy. We'll need you both at the field office tomorrow for more depositions. After she left, Franklin and I stepped onto the balcony again, watching the sun begin to set over San Francisco Bay. Co-CEO? I asked. Are you sure? More sure than I've ever been, he replied. You saved the company, Maggie. You saved me. You're the only person I trust completely. I leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, a miracle I'd thought lost forever. We have a long road ahead, I said. Yes, he agreed. Rebuilding the company, dealing with Avery's trial, finding our way forward. Together, I reminded him. He kissed the top of my head. Always together. As darkness fell, we remained there. Two people who had started with nothing, built an empire, lost a child to greed, and somehow found their way back to each other. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Whatever came next, we would face it side by side, just as we always had. 6 months after the scandal broke, Franklin and I sat in our new offices at Ellison Technologies. We'd redesigned the executive floor, replacing the imposing, isolated spaces with a more collaborative environment. Franklin's old office, the one where he'd discovered the initial evidence of betrayal, had been completely renovated, exorcising the ghosts of that painful time. The company was slowly healing. We'd lost some key contracts in the immediate aftermath of the scandal, but our transparent approach to the crisis had preserved most of our client relationships. Our stock had taken a hit, but was gradually recovering as we implemented new governance protocols and refocused on our core mission, technology that improved lives. The neural interface trials are showing promising results, Franklin said, reviewing the latest R&D reports. Dr. Chen thinks we could be ready for FDA submission by year's end. I nodded, remembering how Dr. Chen had been one of the few board members to express genuine concern during that fateful meeting. We'd kept him on, valuing his scientific expertise and ethical standards. What about the accessibility initiative? I asked. Franklin smiled. On track. The first batch of low-cost tablets for underserved school ships next month. This was our response to the scandal, doubling down on projects that reflected our values. While Neurotech pursued military contracts and surveillance technology, we were deliberately moving in the opposite direction. Medical applications, educational tools, assistive devices for people with disabilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Ramirez, now a friend as well as our FBI contact. Sentencing tomorrow. Thought you'd want to know. I showed Franklin the message. His expression darkened momentarily. Will you go? He asked quietly. I'd visited Avery several times over the past months. Franklin had not returned after our initial confrontation. Yes, I replied. She's still our daughter, Franklin. He nodded but didn't offer to accompany me. The wound was still too raw for him. While I had found a way to separate the child we raised from the woman who betrayed us, Franklin struggled to reconcile the two. Bradley's facing 20 years minimum, he said. The prosecutors are pushing for the maximum. And Avery? He sighed. Her cooperation helped the case substantially, and her involvement was less direct than Bradley's. Probably 5 to 7 years, with the possibility of parole. 5 to 7 years. Our daughter would be in her mid-30s when released. Her prime years spent behind bars. The thought still felt surreal. Have you read her letters? I asked gently. Franklin shook his head. Avery had written to us both monthly since her arrest. Long, soul-searching letters that traced her gradual corruption under Bradley's influence and her desperate need for her father's approval, which had twisted into resentment and eventually destructive action. I can't, Maggie, he said simply. Not yet. I understood. Franklin had always been our family's emotional center, the one who taught Avery to ride a bike, who stayed up helping with science projects, who beamed with pride at her college graduation. The betrayal had struck at the very core of his identity as a father. When you're ready, I said, touching his hand lightly. Our, new assistant, David, knocked on the glass door. Sorry to interrupt, but your 3 o'clock is here. The STEM Scholarship Committee? Send them in, Franklin said, his expression brightening. This was our latest project, the Franklin and Margaret Ellison Foundation for Ethical Innovation, providing scholarships to students committed to developing technology for social good. It was a way to reclaim our legacy, to ensure that the Ellison name would eventually be associated with something positive again. The meeting went well, with the committee approving funding for 20 additional scholarships. Afterward, Franklin and I walked to the rooftop garden we'd added during the renovation, a peaceful space where employees could reflect, collaborate, or simply breathe. Do you ever regret coming back? I asked, as we sat on a bench overlooking the city. You could have disappeared permanently, started over somewhere else. Franklin considered the question. Sometimes, he admitted, in my darkest moments. But then I remember what we built here, the good we can still do. He took my hand. And I could never leave you behind, Maggie. You almost did, I reminded him gently. He winced. My biggest mistake. I should have told you my suspicions from the beginning, should have trusted you with the truth. You were protecting me. Was I? He asked. Or was I just afraid? Afraid you wouldn't believe that our daughter could do something so terrible? I had no answer for that. The truth was, if Franklin had come to me initially with his suspicions about Avery, I might not have believed him. I might have defended her, warned her even. Love could be blinding that way. We can't change the past, I said finally. We can only move forward. He squeezed my hand. Together. The next day, I sat in the courtroom as Avery received her sentence. 6 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 4, plus restitution payments to the company. She stood, straight-backed as the judge delivered the terms, only her trembling hands betraying her emotion. Afterward, I was permitted a brief meeting with her before she was transferred. Mom, she said, her voice small in the institutional room. Thank you for coming. Of course, I replied, studying her face. The entitlement that had once hardened her features was gone, replaced by a solemn maturity. Dad didn't come, she observed. Not a question. He's not ready, Avery. He may never be. She nodded, accepting this. I understand. I wouldn't forgive me either. He still loves you, I said. That's what makes this so painful for him. And you? She asked, meeting my eyes. Do you still love me? I'll always love you, I answered truthfully. But I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you. Again, she accepted this with quiet dignity. Fair enough. I have a lot to prove, to myself as much as to you and Dad. What will you do with your time inside? I asked. I've enrolled in the prison's education program, she said, and I'm working with my therapist to understand why I made the choices I did. She hesitated. I'd like to develop some ideas for technologies that could help people. Reintegrate after incarceration, if that's something the company might be interested in someday. The request surprised me. Not just the practical thinking, but the humility behind it. This was not the entitled daughter demanding her birthright back, but a woman looking for a meaningful way to make amends. Write up your ideas, I said. I'll make sure the R&D team reviews them. Hope flickered in her eyes. Really? Your actions had consequences, Avery. Severe ones. But that doesn't mean your life is over, or that you can't eventually contribute something positive. As our time ended, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Will you tell Dad I'm sorry? That I think about what I did to him every day? He knows, Avery. He reads your letters. Her head snapped up. He does? Yes. He can't bring himself to respond yet, but he reads every word. Tears filled her eyes. That's something, at least. As the guard led her away, I felt the familiar ache of what we'd lost, but also perhaps a tiny seed of what might someday grow in its place. Not the blind trust of before, but something more measured. A cautious hope. Back at the office, Franklin was waiting. How did it go? 6 years, possible parole after 4, I reported, setting down my bag. She seemed different, more reflective. He nodded but didn't press for details. Instead, he showed me the latest prototype of our neural interface, smaller, more efficient, and crucially, designed with safeguards that would make military applications nearly impossible. We've submitted 5 new patents, he said proudly. This generation of the technology could help thousands of paralysis patients communicate. I smiled, recognizing what he was doing, focusing on the future we could build, rather than the past we couldn't change. It was his way of coping, of healing. That evening, we left the office early and walked to the waterfront, something we hadn't done in years. The sun was setting over the Golden Gate Bridge, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Remember our first apartment?" Franklin asked, nodding toward the distant shoreline where we'd once lived in a tiny studio. How could I forget? You coding all night, me sewing client orders on that ancient machine. "We were happy," he said softly, "with nothing but each other." I leaned into him. "We'll be happy again." Franklin. Different, but happy. He nodded, his arm tightening around me. I believe that now. I couldn't at first, but I do now. As darkness fell over the bay, we stood together, survivors of a betrayal that had nearly destroyed us, but had ultimately failed to break what mattered most. Our bond, our shared vision, our determination to leave something good behind in this world. The company would recover. Our reputation would slowly be rebuilt. And maybe someday, our family might find its own form of healing. But for now, this was enough. Standing together at the end of a difficult day, looking toward tomorrow. 1 year after Avery's sentencing, I received a call from Sean Ridge. Though the FBI investigation had concluded months ago, Sean had remained in touch, occasionally consulting for our enhanced corporate security team. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, his voice grave, "I've found something you and Franklin need to see. Today, if possible." The urgency in his tone concerned me. "What is it, Sean?" "Not over the phone. This is sensitive." 2 hours later, Franklin and I sat in a private room at Sean's office in Oakland. He placed a laptop before us and pulled up a video file. "This was recovered from a cloud backup on one of Bradley's encrypted devices," Sean explained. "The FBI's tech team just finished decrypting it last week." The video showed Bradley in what appeared to be a hotel room, speaking to someone off camera. "The Ellison plan is proceeding," Bradley said. "Avery's fully committed. She believes this is about modernizing the company's direction, positioning for the merger. And she has no idea about the military applications?" a voice asked from off-screen. "None. She's focused on the business angle. Market share, stock options, her future CEO position. She's ambitious but naive." "Good," the voice replied. "And the father?" "Franklin's becoming suspicious. We may need to accelerate the timeline." "You're sure the girl will cooperate, even if it means removing her father from the equation?" Bradley smirked. "Avery's completely under my control. She'd do anything I ask. She thinks we're in love. And if she becomes a liability, then she takes the fall," Bradley said coldly. "All the documents have her signatures, not mine. The money transfers go through accounts in her name. If things go south, she's our scapegoat." Sean paused the video. "There's more, but that's the relevant part. The date stamp shows this was recorded 3 weeks before the attempt on Franklin's life." I felt physically ill. Franklin's face had gone ashen. "Who was he talking to?" Franklin asked. Sean clicked to another file. "This is from a different angle. Same meeting." The new footage revealed Bradley's conversation partner, Richard Vance, CEO of Neurotech. "It was never just a merger," Sean explained. "Neurotech wanted your neural interface technology specifically for its military potential. They knew you'd never sell, and that the ethical safeguards you'd built into the patents would prevent weaponization. So they plotted to remove me and manipulate Avery," Franklin concluded. "Using Bradley as their proxy," Sean confirmed. "They identified her as your weak point, ambitious enough to want change, but not experienced enough to see the bigger picture." I thought back to Avery's words during our prison visits, her insistence that she never wanted Franklin dead, that things had escalated beyond her control. "She was being manipulated," I said softly. "Used. It appears so," Sean agreed. Bradley was reporting directly to Vance. "Based on these recordings and others we've found, it seems Avery genuinely believed this was about modernizing the company through a strategic merger. The plot to harm Franklin, That came from Bradley and Vance. Franklin rubbed his face, the implications sinking in. Avery still made terrible choices, he said. She still participated in embezzlement, fraud, corporate espionage. Yes, Sean acknowledged. She's not innocent, but she was also a pawn in a much larger game, one orchestrated by Neurotech from the beginning. Does the FBI know? I asked. Yes. They're building a case against Vance now. These videos are significant new evidence. Franklin stood and paced the small room, his mind clearly racing. This changes things, he said finally. Does it? I asked. Avery still betrayed us? Franklin. She still chose money and power over integrity. Yes, he agreed. But there's a difference between poor judgment and malice, between being manipulated and being the manipulator. He turned to Sean. Has Avery seen these videos? No. The FBI is still treating them as confidential evidence. Franklin nodded decisively. I need to see her. The request for a special visitation was granted quickly, given the new evidence. The next day, Franklin and I were escorted to the same stark room where I'd visited Avery periodically over the past year. When she entered and saw Franklin, her steps faltered. It had been 18 months since they'd last spoken, in that first confrontation after her arrest. Dad, she whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Franklin didn't speak. Immediately. He studied her face, thinner now, with a gravity that hadn't been there before. Sit down, Avery, he finally said. She complied, her movements cautious, as if afraid any sudden motion might cause him to disappear. We've discovered new evidence, I explained gently, about Bradley's relationship with Neurotech. Her brow furrowed. What kind of evidence? Franklin leaned forward. Videos proving that Bradley was working directly for Richard Vance from the beginning, that their plan always included, he hesitated, removing me permanently. The color drained from Avery's face. No, she whispered. That's not possible. Bradley wouldn't. He did, Franklin interrupted firmly. And he was using you as his unwitting accomplice, with plans to make you the scapegoat if things went wrong. Avery shook her head in denial, but I could see the awful recognition dawning in her eyes. The separate meetings, she murmured. The calls I wasn't allowed to join. The documents he had me sign without fully explaining. Tell us the truth, Avery, Franklin demanded. Did you know they planned to kill me? No, she exclaimed, her eyes filling with tears. Never. Bradley said we just needed to pressure you into retirement. That the brake line tampering was just to scare you, to show how serious we were. Her voice broke. When that failed, the plan changed to faking your death. I thought you'd be safe somewhere else while we completed the merger. Then we'd reveal you were alive, that it had all been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Franklin repeated, incredulously. Embezzlement and corporate espionage, just a misunderstanding? Avery hung her head. I know how it sounds. I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I made terrible choices. I betrayed everything you taught me. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. But I swear, Dad, I never wanted you dead. When Bradley started talking about permanent solutions, I thought he meant forcing you into retirement. I was blind, stupid, so focused on proving myself that I couldn't see I was being used. Franklin was silent for a long moment, weighing her words. The videos support your version, he finally said. Bradley was clearly manipulating you, planning to use you as a scapegoat all along. A fragile hope flickered across Avery's face. You believe me? I believe you didn't know the full extent of their plans, Franklin clarified. That doesn't erase what you did knowingly participate in. I know, she said quietly, and I'll serve my time for those crimes. I deserve to. The humility in her voice seemed genuine, so different from the entitled, ambitious daughter who had stood in our boardroom demanding control of the company. Your mother tells me you've been developing ideas, Franklin said, changing the subject, for technologies to help people reintegrate after incarceration. Avery nodded, seemingly surprised by the shift. Yes, there are so many barriers for people trying to rebuild their lives. I've been designing a platform that could help with everything from job searching to skills training to managing the logistics of probation. For the first time, a hint of the old pride flickered in Franklin's eyes, not for what Avery had accomplished, but for what she might yet become. Send me your proposals, he said. All of them. She stared at him. You'd look at my ideas? After everything? You're still brilliant, Avery, he said simply. That hasn't changed. And if you're channeling that brilliance toward helping others rather than helping yourself, that suggests you might be changing. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I am, she whispered. Every day in here, I think about what I did, what I lost, who I was becoming. She wiped her eyes. I don't want to be that person anymore. As our visit concluded, Franklin did something that surprised both Avery and me. He reached across the table and briefly squeezed her hand. This doesn't fix everything, he said. But it's a start. The relief and gratitude in Avery's eyes was almost painful to witness. As the guard led her away, she looked back once, her gaze holding her father's. A silent exchange between two people who had nearly destroyed each other, now cautiously finding their way back to some new form of understanding. Outside the prison, Franklin was quiet as we walked to the Southbound car. Are you okay? I asked. No, he admitted. But I think I might be someday. He looked at me. She was a pawn, Maggie. A willing one, yes, but still a pawn in something much bigger than she understood. Does that change how you feel about her actions? He considered this carefully. It contextualizes them. It doesn't excuse them. But it opens a door, I suggested. Franklin nodded slowly. A very small one, with very strong conditions. It was more than I had hoped for. After months of Franklin refusing to speak Avery's name, refusing to acknowledge the letters she sent, this represented a monumental shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of a path toward it. As we drove away from the prison, Franklin reached for my hand. I've been thinking about the foundation, he said. What if we added a focus on ethics education? Courses on ethical decision-making in business and technology? I smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind his suggestion. This was Franklin's way of processing what had happened, by trying to prevent it from happening to others. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said. In fact, I think it might be the most important work we could do. He nodded, his gaze on the road ahead. We build technology to improve lives, but first, we need to make sure the people creating that technology understand the responsibility that comes with it. In that moment, I glimpsed the beginning of our next chapter. Not just rebuilding what had been broken, but creating something new from the painful lessons we'd learned. A legacy beyond circuits and code, beyond profit margins and market share. A legacy of integrity. 3 years passed. Ellison Technologies not only recovered from the scandal but emerged stronger, with a renewed focus on ethical innovation and social responsibility. Our Ethics in Technology program, launched through the Foundation, was now being taught in universities across the country. The Neural Interface project had received FDA approval and was changing lives for paralysis patients worldwide. Franklin and I had settled into our roles as co-CEOs, though we were beginning to discuss succession plans. Real ones this time, with a carefully vetted leadership team that shared our values. At 68, we were starting to think about the next chapter of our lives. I still visited Avery monthly. Franklin joined me. Quarterly. Not the close relationship they once had, but a cautious rebuilding of trust. Avery had served half of her sentence and was coming up for her first parole hearing, with strong recommendations from prison officials and her therapists. The board reviewed Avery's reintegration platform proposal, Franklin told me one evening as we sat on the deck of our new home, a smaller, more modest place overlooking the bay. We'd sold the mansion, donating most of the proceeds to the foundation. They think it has potential. I looked up from my book, surprised. They want to develop it? As a nonprofit subsidiary, he clarified, separate from our main business, but with our resources behind it. If Avery's granted parole, they're considering offering her a position to lead the development. My heart skipped. You supported this? Franklin sipped his tea thoughtfully. I did, with strict oversight and a probationary period, of course. Of course, I echoed, trying to contain my emotion. This represented a monumental shift in Franklin's thinking, from refusing to speak of Avery to considering her future role, however limited, in the company. She's earned a chance, Maggie, he said quietly. 3 years of exemplary behavior, genuine remorse, and ideas that could help thousands of people in similar situations. He shook his head. I'm not naive enough to think she hasn't changed. Do you trust her? I asked directly. No, he admitted. Not fully, maybe never again. But I believe in rehabilitation, in second chances, and the monitoring systems we'd put in. Place would ensure she couldn't access sensitive company information or finances. I nodded, understanding his cautious approach. Have you told her? Not yet. I wanted to discuss it with you first, and it all depends on the parole hearing anyway. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Franklin and I both submitted letters supporting Avery's early release, highlighting her exemplary behavior, ongoing therapy, and the reintegration work she'd developed while incarcerated. When the day arrived, we sat in the back of the hearing room, watching as Avery presented her case to the parole board. She was poised and humble, acknowledging her crimes without excuses while demonstrating genuine remorse and a clear plan for her future. My actions hurt many people, she told the board, most of all my parents, whose trust I betrayed completely. I can never undo that damage, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, not just to them, but to society. She outlined her reintegration platform and her hopes of helping others avoid the ethical pitfalls she had succumbed to. The board deliberated for less than an hour before granting her parole. The conditions were strict: regular check-ins with a parole officer, continued therapy, limited financial authority, and no international travel for 3 years. But she would be released within the month. Afterward, we met briefly in a small conference room. Avery was still processing the news, her emotions barely contained. "Thank you," she said, looking at both of us, "for the letters, for being here today. You earned it," Franklin said simply. "Your conduct has been exemplary." "What happens now?" she asked, the uncertainty of freedom suddenly looming before her. I glanced at Franklin, who nodded slightly. "We have a proposition for you," I began. "The board has reviewed your reintegration platform proposal and sees potential in it. They're considering establishing a nonprofit subsidiary to develop it, with you leading the project." Avery's eyes widened. "Working for Ellison Technologies?" "Adjacent to it," Franklin clarified. "A separate entity, but with our resources and oversight." "The oversight would be significant," I added gently. "At least initially. You'd have no access to company financials or sensitive intellectual property." Avery nodded quickly. "Of course. I understand completely." Her voice thickened with emotion. "Just the opportunity to do something meaningful, to work on something that could help people. That's more than I ever expected." "It's not charity," Franklin said firmly. "The idea has merit, and you have skills that could make it successful." "Where would I live?" she asked, the practical realities setting in. "We've arranged a small apartment near the office," I explained. "Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. Part of the reintegration program the company started for employees with criminal records." Avery's eyes filled with tears. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Franklin replied. "The rest will be up to you. This is a chance, Avery. What you do with it is your choice." A month later, I stood outside the prison gates as Avery emerged, carrying a small box of belongings accumulated during her incarceration. She looked both older and younger somehow, the hardness gone from her face, replaced by a quiet determination. Franklin had chosen not to come, feeling that this transition would be easier with just me. Some boundaries were still necessary, he believed. I didn't disagree. "Ready?" I asked, opening the car door. She nodded, taking a deep breath of free air. "Ready?" The apartment we'd arranged was simple but comfortable, with basic furnishings and a small balcony overlooking a neighborhood park. Avery walked through it slowly, touching surfaces as if to convince herself this was real. "It's perfect," she said. "More than I deserve." "It's what you need to start over," I corrected her. "Nothing more, nothing less." I'd stocked the refrigerator with essentials and left a new laptop on the desk, secure but restricted, as required by her parole conditions. A smartphone with similar limitations sat beside it. "Your parole officer will visit tomorrow," I explained, "and you're expected at the foundation offices on Monday to begin work on your project." I handed her an envelope. "This contains everything you need to know: contact information, schedules, expectations." Avery took it, her hand steady. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I am so sorry. For everything." "I know," I replied simply. "Will Dad ever truly forgive me?" I considered this carefully. Franklin has come a long way from where he was. He's giving you this chance. That's significant, but not the same. "As forgiveness," she observed. "No," I agreed. "That may take more time, or it may never come completely. You need to be prepared for that possibility." She nodded, accepting this reality. "And you? Have you forgiven me?" I looked at my daughter, my only child, once the center of our world, then the architect of our greatest pain, now something in between. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. Every day. Just as you're working on becoming someone worthy of that forgiveness. She accepted this answer with quiet dignity. Fair enough. As I prepared to leave, Avery stopped me with one more question. The company, she said. Is it really doing well? I smiled. Better than ever. The neural interface is changing lives, the ethics program is expanding, and your father's latest project, technology to help detect early-stage dementia, shows incredible promise. Pride flickered in her eyes, not for herself, but for what her parents had built and preserved despite her actions. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. Good, she said simply. That's good. I left her there in her new apartment, standing on the threshold of a second chance neither of us had been certain would ever come. The next few months were a careful dance of boundaries and tentative rebuilding. Avery threw herself into the reintegration platform development, working long hours and generating impressive results. Her team, initially wary of working with the notorious Avery Ellison, gradually came to respect her ideas and leadership. Franklin kept his distance professionally, having no direct oversight of her project, but they began a tradition of monthly dinners. Sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes warming, always honest. I joined them occasionally, but also recognized that they needed space to forge their own new relationship. 6 months after her release, Avery's platform launched in beta form. Second Start provided recently released individuals with job training, housing, assistance, mental health resources, and a supportive community. The initial results were promising, with recidivism rates significantly lower among participants than the national average. At the small launch event, Avery gave a brief speech that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Second chances aren't given, she told the audience. They're earned, through accountability, through making amends, through consistent actions that rebuild trust. This platform exists because I know firsthand how hard that journey is, and because I believe everyone deserves the opportunity to try, as I've been fortunate enough to do. Franklin stood beside me, his expression unreadable. But when Avery finished speaking, he was the first to applaud. Later, as we drove home, he finally spoke about what we'd both been feeling. She's different, he observed. Truly different. Yes, I agreed. The entitlement is gone. The ambition is still there, but it's redirected. Toward helping others, Franklin mused. Who would have thought? I glanced at him. Does it change anything for you? He was quiet for a long moment. It changes everything and nothing, he finally said. I'm proud of who she's becoming, but I haven't forgotten who she was. Can both exist simultaneously? I asked. The pride and the memory of betrayal? I think they have to, he replied. At least for me. It wasn't perfect reconciliation. It wasn't the unblemished family bond we'd once had, but it was honest, and it was healing, in its own complicated way. As Franklin and I continued leading Ellison, technologies toward its ethical future, and as Avery built her platform into something meaningful, we were creating a new kind of family relationship, one based not on blind trust or shared DNA, but on earned respect and careful, intentional reconnection. It wasn't what we'd planned. It wasn't what we'd hoped for when we'd held our newborn daughter decades earlier, but it was real, and it was ours. And somehow, that was enough. 5 years after Avery's release, Franklin and I stood on the stage at Ellison Technologies' 50th anniversary celebration. The grand ballroom was filled with employees, partners, and friends who had supported the company through its darkest days and its remarkable resurgence. When we started in our tiny apartment with nothing but a dream and a second-hand computer, Franklin told the crowd, we never imagined standing here half a century later. We've weathered economic downturns, technological revolutions, personal challenges, and yes, even betrayal from within. A respectful hush fell over the room. Everyone knew the story, though it was rarely discussed openly anymore. But what defines us isn't the crises we've faced, I continued, stepping forward. It's how we've responded to them, with integrity, with purpose, with an unwavering commitment to using technology to improve lives, not simply to generate profit. We unveiled the company's new mission statement, expanded to explicitly include ethical considerations in every aspect of business. Then we made the announcement we'd been planning for months. Tonight, we're also announcing our formal retirement as co-CEOs, Franklin said. Effective next quarter, leadership will transition to our executive team, led by Dr. Maya Chen as CEO and Simon Ellison as chairman. The crowd applauded as Maya and Simon, Franklin's brother, who had stood by us during the darkest days of the scandal, joined us on stage. They represented the perfect balance of scientific vision and ethical grounding that we'd sought in our successors. And finally, I added, we're pleased to announce the expansion of the Second Start Foundation, which will now operate independently with increased funding and a broader mission. Avery walked onto the stage, poised and professional in a simple black dress. In the 5 years since her release, Second Start had grown from a small pilot program to a nationally recognized reintegration initiative, helping thousands of formerly incarcerated individuals rebuild their lives. Second Start began as my personal journey of redemption, Avery told the audience, a way to make something positive from my mistakes. Today, it's grown beyond me, a community of people committed to the idea that one's worst actions shouldn't define their entire life. I watched the crowd's reaction carefully. There were still those who would never forgive Avery, who saw her presence as inappropriate, but most nodded in appreciation of what she'd built, a program that genuinely helped people and that operated with transparent accountability. With the expanded funding announced tonight, Avery continued, we'll be opening 5 new centers across the country, focusing particularly on technology training for returning citizens. Because in today's economy, digital literacy isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for meaningful employment. As the formal presentations concluded and the celebration moved to dinner and dancing, I found myself standing with Franklin near the windows overlooking the San Francisco skyline. 50 years, he marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that we were eating ramen noodles and dreaming about changing the world with technology. And sometimes it feels like several lifetimes ago, I replied. We watched as Avery moved through the crowd, professional and reserved, careful not to appear too connected to the company while still representing Second Start with dignity. She had carved out her own redemption story, separate from but connected to the Ellison legacy. She's done well, Franklin observed. Better than I expected. Yes, I agreed, though I think she'll always carry the weight of what happened. As do we. He nodded, his eyes following our daughter. I've been thinking about forgiveness lately, he said quietly. What it means, what it doesn't mean. I waited, giving him space to continue. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, he said finally. It doesn't erase consequences or magically restore trust. It just means choosing to release the anger, to stop letting the betrayal define everything. And have you? I asked gently. Released the anger? He considered this carefully. Mostly, he admitted. Not entirely, but enough to move forward without it consuming me. He looked at me. What about you, Maggie? Have you forgiven her? Yes, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. Not because what she did wasn't terrible. It was, but because holding on to that pain hurts me more than it hurts her now. Franklin nodded slowly. Maybe that's the wisdom that comes with 70 years of life, learning which battles to fight and which to surrender. Across the room, Avery caught our gaze and gave a small, hesitant smile. Franklin returned it, not with the unguarded affection of before, but with genuine warmth. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, the 3 of us found ourselves alone on the building's rooftop garden, the space Franklin and I had created during the company's rebuilding phase. Congratulations on your retirement, Avery said, though I can't imagine either of you truly stepping away completely. We'll consult, I acknowledged, but the day-to-day leadership belongs to the next generation now. The company is in good hands with Maya and Uncle Simon, she said. As is Second Start with you, Franklin replied. Avery looked at him, surprised by the direct compliment. Thank you, she said simply. That means a lot, coming from you. An awkward silence fell, filled with the weight of everything that had happened and everything that remained unsaid. Finally, Franklin broke it. I've never asked you this directly, he said, and you don't have to answer, but I need to know. When did it start? The turn toward what happened? Avery took a deep breath, clearly having expected this question someday. It was gradual, she said. Bradley came into my life when I was feeling overlooked at the company. He made me feel valued, important. He started planting ideas about Dad being stuck in the past, about the company needing fresh leadership. She looked down at her hands. I was weak, insecure, eager to prove myself. The small compromises came first. Looking the other way on questionable contracts, sharing information I shouldn't have. By the time I realized how deep I was, it felt too late to turn back. And now? I asked, Looking back with perspective, now I see what I couldn't then, she said. That I was chasing all the wrong things. Status, power, approval from someone who never actually cared about me. She looked up at Franklin. I had a father who valued integrity above all else, and instead I listened to a man who had none. Franklin was quiet for a long moment. We all make mistakes, Avery, he finally said. Mine was not seeing what was happening to you, not being the father you needed when you were struggling. No, she said firmly. You don't get to take responsibility for my choices. You taught me right from wrong. I chose wrong, repeatedly, knowingly. That's on me, not you. The honesty between them was painful but cleansing. Perhaps the most genuine conversation they'd had in years. Second Start is extraordinary work, Franklin said, changing the subject slightly. You've helped thousands of people rebuild their lives. It's not enough, Avery replied. It doesn't undo what I did, but it's something meaningful, something that matters. More than stock prices and market share ever did, Franklin observed. Yes, she agreed. Much more. As we prepared to leave the celebration, Avery hesitated, then asked, Will I see you both at Sunday dinner this week? We had begun a tradition of monthly family dinners the previous year, careful, sometimes stilted gatherings as we navigated our new reality. They weren't always comfortable, but they were important. Of course, I replied. I'm making lasagna. Dad's favorite, Avery noted with a small smile. And yours, Franklin added quietly. It was a tiny thing, him remembering, him acknowledging the connection. But I saw how it affected Avery, the flash of emotion quickly controlled. Well, good night then, she said, composed once more. And congratulations again. As she walked away, Franklin took my hand. We did it. Maggie, he said, we built something that will outlast us. Something good. Yes, I agreed. Not just the company, the foundation, the ethics program, and maybe even our family, in its new form. We made our way home to our quiet house by the bay, where photographs told the story of our lives, the early days of struggle, the years of success, the family we'd created, broken and partially mended. Not a perfect story, but a human one. 6 months later, Franklin and I sat on our deck, watching the sunset over the water. Retirement suited us. Time for travel, for the foundation work we loved, for each other. Sunday dinners with Avery had become more relaxed, more genuine. Second Start was thriving under her leadership, expanding to new cities, helping more people. I had lunch with Avery. Yesterday, Franklin mentioned casually. Oh? This was new. They rarely met one-on-one. She asked me to consider joining Second Start's advisory board to help develop their technology training curriculum. I set down my book. What did you say? He smiled slightly. I said yes. The simple statement carried enormous weight. Not just forgiveness, but the beginning of a new collaboration. Professional, bounded, but real. She's earned it, he said, answering my unspoken question. 5 years of consistent ethical leadership, transparent financials, measurable impact. It's not about the company, I observed. It's about helping people directly. Exactly. He looked out at the darkening horizon. Maybe that's what we both need at this stage of life. To step back from systems and focus on individuals. I took his hand, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. From young dreamers to tech titans to betrayed parents to something new, something we were still defining. Do you remember what you said to me that night after we exposed the conspiracy? I asked. When I asked what happens now? Franklin smiled. I said we rebuild. Not the company. Us. And we have, I said softly. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. He nodded, squeezing my hand. The truth is, I'll never forget what happened, but I'm choosing not to let it define our family's entire story. That's wisdom, I said. No, he corrected gently. That's love. Complicated, cautious, clear-eyed love, but love nonetheless. As darkness fell completely, we sat together. In comfortable silence, two people who had weathered the unimaginable and emerged not unscathed, but undefeated. Our company would continue without us. Our daughter had found her own path to redemption, and we had each other, as we had from the very beginning. Some wounds never heal completely. Some trust, once broken, is never fully restored. But life continues, and with it, the possibility of new connections, new understandings, new forms of love that acknowledge the scars, rather than pretending they don't exist. In the end, that was our greatest accomplishment. Not the billions we'd made or the technology we'd created, but the hard-won wisdom that integrity matters more than success, that redemption is possible even after terrible mistakes, and that love, in all its complicated forms, remains the most powerful force in human experience. Together, Franklin whispered, echoing the promise we'd made to each other 1,000 times over 50 years. Always together, I replied,